If you've ever loved someone who kept you at arm's length, someone who pulled away just when you were getting close, then you know how confusing and painful that experience can be. Maybe you found yourself constantly questioning what you said, what you did, or whether you were asking for too much. You tried to stay calm, to be understanding, to give them space, thinking that eventually they'd come around. But no matter how much you gave, you always felt like you were one step behind, emotionally chasing someone who wouldn't let you catch them. Hey, I'm Jim Rohn, and in today's video, we're diving into something avoidant partners never want you to understand. Because once you see it clearly, once the illusion breaks, the dynamic between you and the avoidant person starts to fall apart. Not because you confront them with anger or try to change them, but because you stop feeding the emotional imbalance that kept you stuck. Avoidantly attached people operate in a specific pattern. They offer just enough attention to keep you hooked, but withdraw the moment things start to feel intimate or vulnerable. That hot and cold behavior keeps you in a loop, always trying, always proving, always waiting. And without realizing it, you begin doing all the emotional work for the relationship. You show up, explain, overthink, chase, and settle for crumbs, hoping they'll finally see your worth. But here's the truth: they don't crumble because you push harder, they crumble when you stop. When you finally understand that their distance isn't a mystery, it's a pattern rooted in fear, not power, the whole dynamic begins to collapse. Not because you punish them, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. In this video, I'm going to show you how that shift happens. We'll break down the psychology of avoidant attachment, why their behavior feels so confusing, and how reclaiming your energy and clarity is the key to turning the entire pattern around, not to win them back, but to finally win yourself back. So if you're ready to stop walking on eggshells and start living from a place of emotional strength, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with me. This isn't about playing games. This is about healing. Let's get into it. Let's start with something most people in a relationship with an avoidant don't realize right away: the power you think they hold over you. It's mostly an illusion. Avoidants often operate from a space of emotional distance. They don't dive deep into feelings. They don't talk about us in the future. And that emotional gap between you becomes the very thing that hooks you in. They show you just enough, maybe a kind message here, a great date there, to keep you hoping. But the consistency, the emotional safety, that never quite arrives. And so you stay stuck in a cycle of craving what they only occasionally give. This is where the illusion of power starts to grow. You begin to think they hold all the cards. Because they're pulling away, you start reacting. You chase, you question, you overthink every silence and every delayed text. The power shift happens quietly, but quickly. Without even noticing, you stop feeling like an equal partner and start feeling like a puzzle solver. You're constantly trying to figure out how to get back to that moment when they were warm and attentive. But here's the thing: what you're chasing wasn't real stability. It was a moment, a flash, a brief window before they retreated again. Let me give you a real example. Sarah was dating someone she deeply cared for. Let's call him Mike. At first, things were great. Mike was charming, sweet, and fun to be around. But every time Sarah brought up anything emotional, anything about her needs, their future, or even her feelings, Mike would pull back. He'd disappear for a few days, then come back as if nothing had happened. Sarah started to question herself. Was she being too much? Was she scaring him off? The truth was, Mike wasn't leading from strength, he was leading from fear. His withdrawal wasn't power. It was a defense mechanism. The moment Sarah started to see that was the beginning of her breakthrough. She realized she wasn't asking for too much, she was asking the wrong person. And more importantly, she realized that the emotional high and low she was experiencing wasn't love. It was uncertainty, and it was addictive. That's what avoidants do, often without even meaning to. They create just enough closeness to keep you emotionally invested, then retreat far enough to make you work harder for their attention. That's not love. That's emotional imbalance. And it can only last as long as you believe they're the ones in control. But here's the truth: they're not. Their pattern only works when you're confused about your own worth. The second you start to see the pattern clearly, the power dynamic begins to shift. Because now you're not trying to decode their silence, you're questioning why you're tolerating it. And that clarity, that's when their illusion of control starts to fall apart. Not because you confronted them, but because you stopped believing they were the ones who got to decide your value. Now let's dive a little deeper into why the avoidant retreats in the first place. Because when you really understand this, everything starts to shift emotionally. Avoidantly attached people didn't wake up one day and decide to fear intimacy. Most of the time, this pattern was wired into them long before they entered adulthood. Maybe they had emotionally unavailable caregivers, or perhaps they grew up in an environment where expressing needs led to rejection, criticism, or shame. So as a result, closeness feels risky. Vulnerability for them doesn't feel like connection, it feels like exposure. And exposure means danger. To protect themselves, they build distance. And the more important you become to them, the more threatening it feels. That's when they start retreating. Now, if you're someone with an anxious or secure attachment style, this behavior can feel incredibly confusing. You assume that closeness means things are going well, that love is growing. But to the avoidant, that same closeness sets off alarm bells. Their nervous system interprets it as pressure. Their instinct is to protect themselves by shutting down or pulling away. So when you open up, they become distant. When you want reassurance, they go quiet. When you ask for more clarity, they suddenly need space. But here's the key: it's not about you. It's about their internal wiring reacting to a perceived emotional threat. Take Jenna and Louise, for example. Jenna is emotionally open and values communication. Louise, on the other hand, starts withdrawing every time she gets vulnerable. When she told him she was starting to fall for him, he didn't respond with warmth. He backed off for several days. Jenna was left spinning, thinking she'd ruined things. But Louise wasn't acting out of cruelty or indifference. He was scared. Her honesty triggered a part of him that associated emotional closeness with danger. He didn't know how to receive love, only how to avoid it. Once you see this clearly, something powerful happens. Their behavior no longer feels like rejection, it feels like what it really is: a defense mechanism. You stop thinking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Why are they afraid of connection?" That's when their power begins to fade, because now you're not absorbing their emotional avoidance as a reflection of your worth. You're seeing it as their pattern. And when you stop reacting from a place of self-blame, you regain your emotional footing. You no longer feel like a child waiting for approval. You're an adult choosing how to respond. Maybe that means staying, maybe that means leaving, but either way, you're no longer playing a role in their emotional drama. You've stepped out of the cycle. That shift is everything. Because once you stop personalizing their silence, their coldness, or their inconsistency, you stop trying to earn their love. You realize their retreat is about them. And with that realization, you take your power back. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood concepts in relationships, especially when you're dealing with someone avoidant. A lot of people think detaching means being cold, shutting down, or pretending you don't care, but real detachment isn't about punishing someone. It's about protecting you. It's about reclaiming your emotional energy and grounding yourself again after you've spent so much of it trying to keep a connection alive with someone who keeps pulling away. You see, when you're attached to an avoidant, you tend to overfunction emotionally. You chase, explain, wait, worry, and try to decode their silence. You give and give, hoping it'll eventually feel safe and secure. But when you start detaching, that emotional chase stops. Not because you've stopped loving, but because you've started respecting your peace more than their unpredictability. Take Nicole, for example. She used to text her avoidant partner after every argument, trying to fix things, trying to keep the connection alive. But it never brought her the resolution she needed. One day, she stopped. She stopped explaining herself, stopped reaching out, and instead began focusing on her own healing. At first, it felt unnatural, like giving up. But over time, she realized she wasn't giving up, she was letting go. Her peace became more important than his approval. And here's the powerful part. When you detach in a healthy way, the avoidant no longer controls your emotional climate. Their distance doesn't throw you into anxiety. Their silence doesn't feel like punishment. You begin responding instead of reacting. You become steady, grounded. And that steadiness is exactly what breaks the cycle, because when you stop needing them to soothe your anxiety, you start doing that for yourself. That's real emotional power. And it's how you finally get your center back. Boundaries are one of the most powerful tools you have when it comes to navigating a relationship with someone who is emotionally avoidant. But here's the key: boundaries aren't about control or punishment, they're about clarity. They help define what you will and won't tolerate. They allow you to communicate your needs in a direct and consistent way. And most importantly, they help you stay emotionally grounded when the other person is unpredictable. Avoidants often operate in emotional gray areas. Their behavior is inconsistent, their communication vague, their commitment unclear. Without boundaries, it's easy to get swept up in their rhythm, waiting, wondering, overthinking. But once you start setting clear expectations, the entire dynamic begins to shift. The emotional fog lifts, and their patterns become impossible to ignore. That's because clarity creates contrast. When you are consistent and emotionally available, their inconsistency doesn't blend in, it stands out. Boundaries work because they remove the unspoken permission that allows avoidant behavior to continue unchecked. Instead of silently tolerating mixed signals or pulling all the emotional weight, you're sending a clear message: this is the standard. This is what I need in a relationship. And when those needs aren't met, you don't plead or explain endlessly. You step back not in anger, but in self-respect. That stability is powerful. It's disruptive in the best way, because avoidants often rely on the emotional chaos that keeps you doubting yourself and trying harder. But when you stop overfunctioning and start standing firm, the imbalance in the relationship becomes undeniable. They can't hide behind their emotional distance anymore. They either step forward with more awareness or the connection naturally fades. And either way, you gain clarity. You're no longer stuck in the cycle. You're not reacting to their avoidance, you're responding to your own truth. And that's where your real power begins. Healing is where everything changes, not just the relationship dynamic, but the way you experience love, connection, and self-worth. The truth is, when you're still operating from wounds, especially anxious attachment wounds, your nervous system is constantly scanning for signs of rejection. You're wired to chase closeness, to overfunction emotionally, to fix what feels unstable. And that energy naturally attracts avoidant partners because it fits into the push-pull dynamic they know so well. But healing breaks that cycle completely. Because once you're no longer reacting from fear, you stop chasing people who aren't choosing you. The healing journey isn't always dramatic. In fact, the most powerful moments are often the quiet ones. You stop reaching for your phone to reread old messages. You stop trying to decode silence. You stop giving the benefit of the doubt when the reality is right in front of you. And most importantly, you stop placing your emotional worth in someone else's hands. That shift from external validation to internal clarity is what rewrites the entire pattern. You begin to choose peace over emotional intensity, stability over uncertainty, truth over potential. And here's what happens next. The avoidant either rises to meet that energy, or they fade. There's no more room to hide in your confusion, because you're no longer confused. You know what you want, you know what you need, and you're not afraid to walk away when it's not there. That confidence can feel confronting to someone avoidant. It forces them to either grow or go. But either outcome is a win for you because you're no longer stuck in limbo. You begin to attract different energy altogether. You see red flags faster. You value consistency more. You feel calm in relationships that might have once felt boring because now you understand that safety isn't dull, it's secure. Love doesn't have to feel like emotional chaos to be meaningful. It can be soft, steady, and mutual. Healing doesn't mean you're suddenly immune to heartbreak or never get triggered again. It means you're aware of your patterns and you respond to them with compassion and boundaries, not panic. You might still feel the sting of someone pulling away, but you won't abandon yourself trying to pull them back. That's growth. And once you're in that space, everything shifts. You stop hoping they'll change and start focusing on the life you are building. The avoidant's silence no longer holds power. Their inability to connect is no longer a reflection of your worth. You stop needing closure from them because you've given it to yourself. That's the real transformation. Healing isn't about fixing them. It's about finally choosing you. And when that becomes your baseline, you'll never chase love again. You'll recognize it by the way it feels safe, reciprocal, and clear from the very beginning. Let's bring it all together with the clarity and self-respect you've been working so hard to reclaim. Throughout this video, we've unpacked one of the most painful but transformational realizations when dealing with an avoidantly attached partner. They don't hold the power you do. Not through force, not through games, but through your own healing, your boundaries, and your decision to stop overfunctioning in relationships that leave you emotionally starved. We explored the illusion of control avoidants seem to have, and how that illusion only lasts as long as you stay confused about your worth. We looked at why they retreat, not because you were too much, but because closeness feels unsafe to them. And we talked about how detachment, emotional clarity, and consistent boundaries don't just protect you, they expose the dynamic for what it really is. Most importantly, we reframed healing not as a destination, but as the moment you stop trying to earn love and start standing firmly in the truth of your own value. From there, the avoidant either grows to meet you or they fade, and either way, you win. Because your emotional life is no longer dictated by someone else's avoidance. It's grounded in your self-worth. So let me leave you with this: you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. You were never too needy, you were deeply available. And that's a strength. You're not hard to love. You just stop settling for halfway. And that's when everything begins to shift. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If this resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. What part of this video hit home for you? And what are you taking with you moving forward? Your voice matters. And your healing, it's already in motion. You've got this, and I'll be here to walk with you every step of the way. Until next time, take care of your heart. You deserve love that feels like home.